on top of the other. "What is that shiny thing down there, chief?" Gourel stooped and picked up a brass pin with a head made of an imitation pearl. "The pearl is quite bright still," said M. Lenormand, "which it would not be if it had been lying in this cellar long. Gertrude passed this way, Gourel." Gourel began to demolish a great stack of empty wine casks, writing desks and old rickety tables. "You are wasting your time," said M. Lenormand. "If that is the way out, how would she have time first to move all those things and then to replace them behind her? Look, here is a shutter out of use, which has no valid reason for being fastened to the wall by that nail. Draw it back." Gourel did so. Behind the shutter, the wall was hollowed out. By the light of the lantern, they saw an underground passage running downwards. "I was right," said M. Lenormand. "The communication is of recent date. You see, it's a piece of work hurriedly done and not intended to last for any length of time. No masonry, 2 planks placed crosswise at intervals, with a joist to serve as a roof, and that is all. It will hold up as best it may, well enough, in any case, for the object in view. That is to say..." "That is to say what, chief?" "Well, first to allow of the going backwards and forwards between Gertrude and her accomplices; and then, one day soon, of the kidnapping, or rather the total, miraculous, incomprehensible disappearance of Mrs. Kesselbach." They proceeded cautiously, so as not to knock against certain beams which did not look over safe. It at once became evident that the tunnel was much longer than the 50 yards at most that separated the house from the boundary of the garden. It must, therefore, end at a fair distance from the walls and beyond the road that skirted the property. "We are not going in the direction of Villeneuve and the lake, are we?" asked Gourel. "Not at all, the other way about," declared M. Lenormand. The tunnel descended with a gentle slope. There was a step, then another; and they veered toward the right. They at once knocked up against a door which was fitted into a rubble frame, carefully cemented. M. Lenormand pushed it and it opened. "One second, Gourel," he said, stopping. "Let us think. It might, perhaps, be wiser to turn back." "Why?" "We must reflect that Ribeira will have foreseen the danger and presume that he has taken his precautions, in case the underground passage should be discovered. Now he knows that we are on his track. He knows that we are searching the garden. He no doubt saw us enter the house. How do I know that he is not at this moment laying a trap for us?" "There are 2 of us, chief." "And suppose there are 20 of them?" He looked in front of him. The tunnel sloped upward again, closed by another door, which was at 5 or 6 yards' distance. "Let us go so far," he said. "Then we shall see." He passed through, followed by Gourel, whom he told to leave the first door open, and walked to the other door, resolving within himself to go no farther. But this second door was shut; and though the lock seemed to work, he could not succeed in opening it. "The door is bolted," he said. "Let us make no noise and go back. The more so as, outside, by remembering the position of the tunnel, we can fix the line along which to look for the other outlet." They therefore retraced their steps to the first door, when Gourel, who was walking ahead, gave an exclamation of surprise: "Why, it's closed!" "How is that, when I told you to leave it open?" "I did leave it open, chief, but the door must have fallen back of its own weight." "Impossible! We should have heard the sound." "Then, I don't know." He went up to the door. "Let's see. There's a key. Does it turn?" "Yes, it turns. But there seems to be a bolt on the other side." "Who can have fastened it?" "They, of course, behind our backs. Perhaps they have another tunnel that runs above this one, alongside of it, or else they were waiting in that empty house. In any case, we're caught in a trap." He grew angry with the lock, thrust his knife into the chink of the door, tried every means and then, in a moment of weariness, said: "There's nothing to be done." "What, chief? Nothing to be done? In that case, we're diddled." "I dare say," said M. Lenormand. They returned to the other door and came back again to the first. Both were solid, made of hardwood, strengthened with crossbeams. In short, indestructible. "We should want a hatchet," said the chief of the detective service, "or, at the very least, a serious implement. A knife even, with which we might try to cut away the place where the bolt is most likely to be. And we have nothing." He was seized with a sudden fit of rage and flung himself upon the obstacle, as though he hoped to do away with it. Then, powerless, beaten, he said to Gourel: "Listen, we'll look into this in an hour or two. I am tired out. I am going to sleep. Keep watch so long. And if they come and attack us?" "Ah, if they come, we shall be saved, chief!" cried Gourel, who would have been relieved by a fight, however great the odds. M. M. Lenormand lay down on the ground. In a minute, he was asleep. When he woke up, he remained for some seconds undecided, not understanding. And he also asked himself what sort of pain it was that was tormenting him. "Gourel?" he called. "Come, Gourel!" Obtaining no reply, he pressed the spring of his lantern and saw Gourel lying beside him, sound asleep. "What on earth can this pain be?" he thought. "Regular twitchings. Oh, why, of course, I am hungry, that's all. I'm starving. What can the time be?" His watch marked 20 minutes past 7, but he remembered that he had not wound it up. Gourel's watch was not going either. Gourel had awoke under the action of the same inward pangs, which made them think that the breakfast hour must be long past and that they had already slept for a part of the day. "My legs are quite numbed," said Gourel, "and my feet feel as if they were on ice. What a funny sensation!" He bent down to rub them and went on: "Why, it's not on ice that my feet were, but in water. Look, chief, there's a regular pool near the first door." "Soaked through," M. Lenormand replied. "We'll go back to the second door. You can dry yourself. But what are you doing, chief? Do you think I am going to allow myself to be buried alive in this vault? Not if I know it. I haven't reached the age. As the two doors are closed, let us try to pass through the walls." One by one, he loosened the stones that stood out at the height of his hand, in the hope of contriving another gallery that would slope upwards to the level of the soil. But the work was long and painful, for in this part of the tunnel, as he perceived, the stones were cemented. Chief, stammered Gourel, in a stifled voice. "Well?" "You're standing with your feet in the water." "Nonsense!" So I am. Well, it can't be helped. I'll dry them in the sun." "But don't you see?" "What?" "Why, it's rising, chief. It's rising." "What's rising?" "The water." M. Lenormand felt a shudder pass over his skin. He suddenly understood. It was not a casual trickling through, as he had thought, but a carefully prepared flood, mechanically, irresistibly produced by some infernal system. "Oh, the scoundrel!" he snarled. "If ever I lay my hands on him. Yes, chief, but we must first get out of this. And, as far as I can see..." Gourel seemed completely prostrated, incapable of having an idea, of proposing a plan. M. Lenormand knelt down on the ground and measured the rate at which the water was rising. A quarter, or thereabouts, of the first door was covered; and the water was half way toward the second door. "The progress is slow, but uninterrupted," he said. "In a few hours it will be over our heads." "But this is terrible, chief! It's horrible!" moaned Gourel. "Oh, look here, don't come boring me with your lamentations, do you understand? Cry if it amuses you, but don't let me hear you." "It's the hunger that weakens me, chief. My brain's going round." "Bite your fist." As Gourel said, the position was terrible. And if M. Lenormand had had less energy, he would have abandoned the vain struggle. What was to be done? It was no use hoping that Ribeira would have the charity to let them out. It was no use, either, hoping that the brothers Doudeville would rescue them, for the inspectors did not know of the existence of the tunnel. So no hope remained, no hope but that of an impossible miracle. Come," said M. Lenormand, "this is too silly. We are not going to kick the bucket here. Hang it all, there must be something. Show me a light, Gourel." Flattening himself against the second door, he examined it from top to bottom, in every corner. There was an enormous bolt on that side, just as there probably was on the other. He unfastened the screws with the blade of his knife, and the bolt came off in his hand. "And what next?" asked Gourel. "What next?" he echoed. "Well, this bolt is made of iron, pretty long and very nearly pointed. Certainly, it's not as good as a pickaxe, but it's better than nothing, and..." Without finishing his sentence, he drove the implement into the side wall of the tunnel, a little in front of the pillar of masonry that supported the hinges of the door. As he expected, once he had passed the first layer of cement and stones, he found soft earth. "To work!" he cried. "Certainly, chief. But would you explain?" "It's quite simple. I want to dig round this pillar a passage, 3 or 4 yards long, which will join the tunnel on the other side of the door and allow us to escape." "But it will take us hours! And meanwhile the water is rising." "Show me a light, Gourel." "In 20 minutes or half an hour at most, it will have reached our feet." "Show me a light, Gourel." M. Lenormand's idea was correct; and with some little exertion, by pulling the earth, which he first loosened with his implement, towards him and making it fall in